They lived on frontier colonies, on agricultural worlds, in quiet communities across human space. And every single one of them, galactic repercussions, the Galactic Council Chamber was located on the neutral station of Harmony Point, a massive structure that floated between star systems, belonging to no single species. The chamber itself was a testament to diplomatic architecture, with seating arranged so that no species sat higher or lower than any other. Today, that chamber was filled with tension. Ambassador Kelreth of the Vecran Empire stood at the speaker's podium, his scaled hands gripping the edges tightly. His translator device rendered his angry hisses into standard galactic language. The evidence is clear. 12 human civilians massacred nearly 200 Vecran soldiers and destroyed a warship. This was not defense. This was butchery. He gestured to the holographic displays floating above the chamber floor. They showed the aftermath of the New Pyongyang incident. Vecran bodies scattered across a farming colony, a warship reduced to debris, escape pods drifting in space, carrying traumatized survivors. We demand sanctions against humanity, Kelreth continued. We demand reparations. We demand that these 12 murderers be turned over to Vecran justice for trial and execution. The representatives from various species murmured among themselves. The incident had shocked the galaxy. Humanity had been quiet since the war ended 15 years ago. Their military had demobilized, their soldiers had retired, and they had focused on peaceful expansion and trade. This sudden violence seemed to contradict everything they knew about post-war humanity. Representative Thorn of Earth sat quietly in the human delegation section. He was a calm man in his 60s with gray hair and patient eyes. He had served in the diplomatic corps for 30 years and had seen many crises. This one was different, though. This one required careful handling. When Kelreth finished his presentation, the council speaker gestured to Thorn. The human delegation may respond. Thorn stood and walked to the podium. He moved slowly, giving himself time to observe the room, to gauge the mood. Many species were sympathetic to the Vecran. After all, 200 deaths seemed disproportionate to any provocation. "Thank you, Council Speaker," Thorn began. "I would like to review the sequence of events, if I may." He activated his own holographic display. 2 weeks ago, a Vecran warship entered the New Pyongyang system without authorization. The colony administrator attempted peaceful communication. The Vecran response was this. The display showed Commander Thrax's broadcast, demanding surrender, tribute, and a tenth of the population as laborers. The chamber fell silent as they listened to the naked threat of orbital bombardment. The colony had no military presence, Thorn continued. No warships, no soldiers. Just 300 civilians living their lives. The Vecran jammed all communications so the colony could not call for help. They landed 200 troops. They threatened to execute children if their demands were not met. He paused, letting that sink in. 12 colonists responded to defend their home. Yes, those 12 were retired military personnel, but they were not soldiers anymore. They were farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, civilians. Ambassador Kelreth interrupted. Civilians do not have the skills to destroy a trained military force. This was clearly a military operation. Thorn smiled slightly. That is an interesting assumption, Ambassador. You seem to believe that retirement erases training and experience. Let me introduce you to the people you are accusing. The holographic display changed, showing personnel files. The council members leaned forward, reading with growing astonishment. Dae-ho, age 58, rice farmer, Thorn read. Prior service, 30 years in Earth Special Operations Division, led the assault that ended the Battle of Proxima Station. Recipient of the Solar Medal of Valor, responsible for completing 14 impossible missions that are still classified. He moved to the next file. Yun, age 62, tavern owner. Prior service, 28 years as a precision marksman. Holds the record for longest confirmed kill in human military history at 2,400 meters. 847 confirmed eliminations during the war. The list continued. Minji, the clinic operator who had saved over 2,000 soldiers during the siege of New Seoul. Bora, the school teacher whose interrogation techniques were still classified. Taijin, the recycling center worker who had commanded orbital assault divisions. Each one a civilian now, but each one carrying decades of the most intensive military training humanity could provide. These people retired because the war ended, Thorne explained. They wanted peace. They wanted normal lives. They earned that right through years of service. But retirement did not make them helpless. It just meant they chose not to fight. A representative from the Pelthian Confederation spoke up. But surely such a violent response was not necessary. They could have negotiated. They could have surrendered and waited for rescue. Thorne turned to face the Pelthian. Ambassador, the Vecran threatened to execute children. They took hostages. They came to a peaceful colony with a warship and 200 troops, demanding slavery and tribute. At what point should civilians accept that? At what point should they bow to threats against their families? He pulled up another display, this one showing galactic law. Under the Galactic Convention, civilians have the right to defend their homes against unlawful aggression. The Vecran initiated hostilities without cause. They threatened non-combatants. They took hostages. Every action they took was a violation of galactic law. But the scale of the response, Kelreth protested. 200 dead, a warship destroyed. How can you justify that? Thorne's expression hardened. How many casualties should we have accepted as reasonable? How many dead colonists would have made you comfortable? How many executed children would have been proportionate? The chamber was silent. The 12 defenders of New Pyongyang used their skills to protect their community, with maximum efficiency and minimum risk to civilians. Thorne continued. 0 colonists died. 0 civilians were injured. The only casualties were the military force that attacked them. If anything, they showed remarkable restraint. He gestured to the personnel files still floating in the holographic display. These people could have killed every Vecran soldier in the first 30 minutes if they had wanted to. They could have destroyed the warship before it even entered orbit. But they did not. They gave warnings. They offered surrender. They only escalated when the Vecran tried to harm children. Ambassador Kelreth's scales flushed with anger. You cannot seriously expect the Council to believe that 12 old farmers defeated a trained military force through legal means. Thorne smiled, and there was something cold in it. Ambassador, I think the problem is that you still think of them as farmers. They are farmers now. They grow crops and run shops and teach school. But they used to be something else. Something your military encountered during the war and learned to fear. He pulled up combat records from the war. The Council members watched footage of human special operations teams in action. Small units destroying enemy positions with surgical precision. Soldiers moving through impossible terrain, striking from unexpected angles, vanishing before the enemy could respond. This is what trained, disciplined, experienced human soldiers look like in combat, Thorne said. Now imagine those same people, 15 years older, defending their homes and families, not following military regulations, not waiting for orders, not bound by political oversight, just civilians exercising their legal right to self-defense with every skill they have spent decades acquiring. He let that image settle in the minds of the Council representatives. The Vecran assumed that retirement made these people weak. They assumed that farmers could not fight back. They were catastrophically wrong. A new representative spoke up, from the Karathi Union. Ambassador Thorne, I must ask, how many colonies like New Pyongyang does humanity have? Thorne had been waiting for this question. We have approximately 4,000 colonies across human space. Most are small, peaceful communities. Agricultural worlds, mining operations, research stations, simple places where people can live quiet lives. And how many retired military personnel live in these colonies? Thorne consulted his datapad, though he already knew the answer. Over the past 20 years, approximately 4 million humans have retired from military service. Many chose to settle in frontier colonies. Exact numbers are not tracked, as they are civilians and entitled to privacy. The implications rippled through the chamber. 4 million retired soldiers scattered across thousands of colonies, each one legally a civilian, each one potentially as dangerous as the 12 who had defended New Pyongyang. Ambassador Kelreth saw his case slipping away. This is a threat. Humanity has seeded the galaxy with sleeper agents. Armed civilians ready to attack at any moment. No, Thorne corrected firmly. Humanity has retired its soldiers. We gave them the peace they earned. We let them become farmers and teachers and shopkeepers. They want nothing more than to live quietly. But if someone attacks them, if someone threatens their families, they will defend themselves. That is not a threat. That is a warning. He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. The people of New Pyongyang wanted peace. The Vekran brought them war. The colonists. The warship's mistake. 6 months earlier, Jiwon had been performing routine maintenance on the water processing satellite that orbited New Pyongyang. It was boring work, checking filters and calibrating sensors. She did not mind boring. Boring was why she had retired from the Navy and moved to a farming colony. While running diagnostics, she noticed something interesting. The satellite had an excellent view of the orbital approach vectors. Any ship entering or leaving orbit would pass within range of the station. She mentioned this casually at dinner with friends. Just an observation, she said, reaching for more rice. The satellite positioning is quite strategic. Kyung-ho, who was helping upgrade the colony's communication systems, nodded thoughtfully. The power systems have excess capacity too. More than you would need for just water processing. Taejin, who had once commanded orbital drop assaults, added, "You know, old military-grade plasma cutters can be modified pretty easily." Not that anyone would do that, of course, they all laughed. It was just conversation over dinner. Probably. Except that Jiwon ordered some replacement parts that were not quite standard, and Kyung-ho installed some software updates that had extra features. And Taejin happened to have kept detailed technical manuals from his service days. And several other retired military personnel found reasons to visit the satellite over the following months for various maintenance tasks. It was all very innocent. Probably. Now, as Commander Thrak charged his warship's weapons to obliterate the colony below, that innocent maintenance was about to prove very significant. In the power station, Yoonji watched her screens. Warship weapons at 80% charge, 20 seconds to firing solution. She had a direct line to the satellite. Jiwon was up there now, having taken a shuttle up hours ago for what she told everyone was an emergency repair. "Jiwon, are you in position?" "Affirmative," came the reply. "All systems are green. Waiting for your signal." Yoonji glanced at Daiho, who stood beside her in the control room. He looked tired but determined. This was not how any of them wanted to spend their retirement. But the Vekran had made their choice. "Do it," Daiho said quietly. Yoonji transmitted the activation code. High above the planet, the water processing satellite finished its rotation. Panels slid open, revealing systems that had definitely not been there during the last official inspection. Which was technically true, because the official inspectors had not known where to look. Inside the satellite, Jiwon sat at a control station that looked nothing like water processing equipment. She checked her targeting computer. The Vekran warship was locked in, its shield still lowered because they had not expected any threat from the planet below. "Target acquired," she reported. "Particle beam charging. This is for every colonist you threatened." The beam lanced out, a spear of coherent particles moving at a fraction of light speed. It covered the distance to the warship in less than a second. The Vekran shields were designed to stop missiles and conventional weapons. They were not rated for military-grade particle cannons that had been carefully rebuilt from scrap components by people who really knew what they were doing. The beam punched through the hull, carved through 3 decks, and vaporized the primary engine control systems. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut. The mighty warship went dark as power systems failed. Commander Thrak was thrown from his chair as the ship shuddered. "Report!" he shouted. "Main engines offline!" His engineer screamed.
"Weapons offline?"
"Shields failing."
"We are dead in space." "How?" Thrak demanded. "What hit us?" The engineer pulled up external sensors. They showed a small satellite, barely larger than a shuttle, with a weapon system that should not exist. "Commander, the water processing satellite just fired a military-grade particle cannon at us." Thrak stared at the screen. A water processing satellite. These humans had turned a civilian station into a warship killer. "How long until we can restore power?" 12 hours minimum. Maybe more. The damage is extensive. "Get me communications. I need to call for backup." The communications officer shook his head. Still jammed, Commander. We cannot transmit through the interference. Below on the planet's surface, Deho activated an open broadcast to the crippled warship. His voice was calm, almost conversational. Commander Thrak, this is Deho. I grow rice. My wife runs a medical clinic. Our friend Hyun makes excellent grilled meat at his tavern. We are farmers and shopkeepers and teachers. We came here to live quiet lives. He paused, letting that sink in. You came to our home. You threatened our children. You tried to enslave our neighbors. You made us remember who we used to be. That was a mistake. On the warship's bridge, Thrak listened with growing dread. We are not the Earth forces, Deho continued. We do not follow their rules anymore. We are not bound by military regulations or political oversight. We are retired. Do you know what that means? Another pause. It means we spent decades learning how to kill efficiently. We learned how to break armies, how to destroy ships, how to win wars. Then we stopped because we wanted peace. We hung up our weapons and became civilians. We planted crops. We raised families. We tried very hard to be normal. Deho's voice hardened. But we never forgot our training. We never lost our skills. We just chose not to use them, until someone gave us a reason. You gave us that reason? Thrak tried to speak, but his throat was dry. He had reviewed human military records. He knew about their special operations forces, their reputation for ruthless efficiency. But those were soldiers. These were supposed to be farmers. You have 20 minutes to abandon ship, Deho said. Use your escape pods. Activate your distress beacons. We will not stop you from calling for rescue. But if you are still on that ship in 20 minutes, we will fire again. And this time we will not aim for your engines. Thrak looked at his officers. They looked back at him with fear in their eyes. They were dead in space, unable to fight back, unable to call for help. Below them was a colony they had thought helpless, defended by people who had just destroyed their warship with a piece of mining equipment. Give the order, Thrak said quietly. Abandon ship. The evacuation was chaotic but swift. Vekran crew members crammed into escape pods and launched. Within 15 minutes, the warship was empty except for automated systems. The pods drifted in orbit, broadcasting distress signals that were no longer jammed. Deho watched from the surface as the last pod launched. Jiwan, are you tracking them? All pods accounted for, she replied. They will be picked up by a passing freighter in about 6 hours. They will be cold and uncomfortable, but they will live. Good. One more thing, though. The warship itself, Jiwan smiled. She had been hoping he would say that. Shall I remove it from orbit? If you would be so kind. The particle beam fired again, this time at full power. It struck the abandoned warship's reactor containment. There was a brilliant flash as the reactor went critical in a controlled manner, designed to destroy the ship without creating dangerous debris. The Vekran warship broke apart, scattering into small pieces that would burn up in the atmosphere or drift harmlessly into space. Commander Thrak watched from his escape pod as his ship died. He had commanded that vessel for 8 years. Now it was debris, destroyed by farmers who had turned a civilian satellite into a weapon system. In the colony below, people began to emerge from their homes. The battle was over. The Vekran were defeated, their soldiers dead or captured, their ship destroyed. The humans had not lost a single person. Hyun secured his rifle and climbed down from the grain silo. His back hurt from lying in the same position for hours. He was getting too old for this. Then again, he had thought he was too old for this 15 years ago. Taijin and his team emerged from the tunnels, dirty and exhausted. They had crawled through those passages for hours, striking from unexpected angles, then disappearing before the Vekran could respond. Bora walked out of the school, past the bodies of Vekran soldiers, past the walls marked with bullet impacts. She thought about the children who would return here in a few days. They would have questions. She would have to find a way to explain what had happened without giving them nightmares. Minji was already at her clinic, ready for casualties that never came. She stood outside looking at the dawn sky and allowed herself a moment of relief. They had protected their home. They had saved their neighbors. And somehow, miraculously, none of them had died doing it. Deho walked through the colony, checking on people, making sure everyone was safe. The residents looked at him differently now. They had known he was retired military, but knowing and seeing were different things. They had just watched a handful of their neighbors destroy a military force that should have been overwhelming. What happens now? Someone asked him. Daeho looked up at the sky where the Vecran escape pods drifted. Now we clean up. We file reports, and we wait to see how the Galactic Council responds to all of this. He did not mention that he was not worried about the Council. The law was clear. Civilians had the right to defend their homes. The Vecran had initiated hostilities against a peaceful colony. The response, while overwhelming, was legally justified. What concerned him more was the message this sent to the rest of the galaxy. Humanity had retired millions of soldiers over the past 2 decades. Retirement protocols. The basement beneath Hyun's tavern smelled of old wood and stored grain. It was a simple space that most colonists used for keeping supplies during the winter months. Tonight it held something more important. 12 people gathered in the dim light, their faces serious and calm. They ranged in age from 50 to 65. They looked like ordinary citizens. Taijin worked at the recycling center and always had grease under his fingernails. Yoonji ran the power station and was known for fixing anything electronic. Donghyun was the colony chaplain who performed weddings and memorial services. They were neighbors, friends, people who shared meals and celebrated holidays together. They were also the most dangerous people on the planet. Daeho stood at the front of the group, a tablet in his hand showing a map of the colony. "Status report," he said quietly. Bora spoke first. "All children are accounted for and hidden. The Vecran tried to secure the school but found it empty. They are currently searching the surrounding buildings." "Good," Daeho nodded. "Yoonji, power grid?" The woman who ran the power station smiled slightly. "I have made preparations. When you give the word, the Vecran camps will go dark, but all civilian areas will remain lit. I also added something special to their fuel supplies. It will not explode, but their generators will not work either." "Communications?" Daeho asked. A thin man named Kyungo adjusted his glasses. "Jammed tight. They cannot call their ship, and their ship cannot easily scan through the interference I am generating. The Vecran think they are in control of communications. They are wrong." Daeho looked around the room. "We have 6 hours until their deadline. They have 200 soldiers spread across the colony. They believe we will surrender." He paused. "We need to discuss the legal framework before we proceed." This was important. During the war, they had been soldiers. They followed orders, obeyed rules of engagement, and operated within military law. But that was 15 years ago. They were civilians now, and civilian law was very different. Minji pulled up a document on her communicator. "I reviewed the Galactic Convention and Earth legal codes. When civilians are threatened in their homes and no military force is present, citizens have the right to defend themselves. Retired military personnel fall under civilian law, not military law." "What does that mean practically?" asked Taijin. "It means we do not need to follow military rules of engagement," Daeho explained. "We do not need to offer surrender. We do not need to take prisoners. We do not need permission to act. We are not soldiers anymore. We are civilians defending our homes." The room was quiet as this sank in. During the war, there had been limits, rules, oversight, politicians and generals who dictated what they could and could not do. But those restrictions only applied to military personnel. They threatened children. Bora said softly. They took hostages. "Under any system of law, we are justified in responding." Daeho nodded. "We are agreed then. This is not a military operation. This is community defense." He looked at each person in turn. "Once we start, there is no going back. The Vecran came here expecting farmers. They will learn what happens when farmers used to be soldiers." They spent the next hour planning. These were people who had trained together, fought together, trusted each other with their lives. They knew each other's strengths and weaknesses. The plans came together quickly and efficiently. Hyun would take the high ground with his rifle. His job was to eliminate key targets and create confusion. Taijin would lead a team through the underground irrigation tunnels to get behind enemy lines. Yoonji would control the power and communications. Bora would handle psychological warfare. Minji would prepare the clinic for casualties, though they hoped there would be none on their side. "What about the children?" someone asked. "The Vecran are using them as leverage." Daeho smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "The children are already safe. Bora evacuated them hours ago through the maintenance tunnels. The Vecran are guarding an empty building. When they figure that out and come looking, we will be waiting." As the meeting concluded, Donghyun stood up. He was the oldest of them at 65. A man with gentle eyes who had married dozens of young couples in the colony. "I want to say something," he announced. "We came here to escape war. We came here to be farmers and teachers and normal people. I do not want to kill again. I am tired of death, everyone nodded. They all felt the same way. But, Donghyun continued, I am more tired of bullies. I am tired of predators who think they can threaten the weak without consequence. These Vekran came to our home, threatened our children and thought we would bow our heads and accept it. They were wrong. His voice hardened. They will learn that human retirement does not mean we have forgotten how to fight. It just means we choose not to. Until we must, the others murmured agreement. They had all tried so hard to be peaceful. They had gardened and taught and built a community. They had earned their rest. But some things could not be tolerated. Daeho checked his watch. It is now 1800 hours. We move at 2200 when darkness is complete. Get some rest. Prepare your equipment. Say goodbye to your families just in case. They dispersed quietly, slipping back to their homes through routes that avoided Vekran patrols. To any observer, they looked like ordinary colonists, scared and hiding. That was fine. Let the Vekran underestimate them. It would make everything easier. In the power station, Yoonji made final adjustments to her systems. She had spent weeks setting up these particular configurations just in case. She had hoped never to use them, but hope did not stop her from being prepared. At the recycling center, Taejin reviewed maps of the tunnel system. He had explored every meter of those passages, memorizing every turn and junction. The Vekran had no idea the tunnels even existed. They would learn. In his room above the tavern, Hyun assembled his rifle with practiced movements. The weapon was old but perfectly maintained. He had not fired it in 15 years, but his hands remembered every adjustment, every calibration. He looked through the scope at the Vekran camp in the distance. 1,200 meters. An easy shot. Bora sat at her desk, writing a message that would be broadcast on Vekran frequencies at precisely 2200 hours. She chose her words carefully. During the war, she had been a specialist in psychological operations. She knew how to break an enemy's will without firing a shot. She knew what scared them. The message was simple. You have made a terrible mistake. Leave now while you still can. The farmers are awake. Night fell over New Pyongyang. The Vekran soldiers settled into their camps confident and relaxed. Some played games. Others ate their rations and joked about the frightened humans hiding in their homes. Commander Thrak sat on his ship, already planning what he would demand next after this colony surrendered. None of them noticed 12 figures moving through the darkness. None of them saw the quiet preparations, the careful positioning, the cold professionalism of people who had done this 1,000 times before. At exactly 2200 hours, the lights in the Vekran camps went out. In the same instant, a shot rang out across the colony, impossibly distant, impossibly accurate. The Vekran communications officer fell dead, a hole through his helmet. 3 seconds later, another shot. The backup operator died before he could reach the radio. The Vekran suddenly realized they were cut off from their ship, sitting in darkness while something moved toward them through the night. The farmers had remembered who they used to be. When farmers remember, the darkness was sudden and complete. One moment, the Vekran camps were illuminated by portable lights and generators. The next moment, everything went black. Soldiers stumbled and cursed, reaching for their equipment in confusion. Private Kelth tried to activate his night vision gear, but nothing happened. He slapped the side of his helmet, thinking it was broken. It was not broken. It was being jammed by signals so precise and targeted that the Vekran had no idea humans possessed such technology. What they did not know was that Kyung-ho had been an electronic warfare specialist for 30 years. He knew every frequency the Vekran used, every protocol, every vulnerability. He had not forgotten. He had just been waiting for someone to give him a reason to remember. In the distance, barely audible, came a voice speaking perfect Vekran. The broadcast came from everywhere and nowhere, calm and certain. You came to frighten farmers. But these farmers used to frighten gods of war. Leave now, and you might survive to regret your mistake. A Vekran sergeant barked orders, trying to restore discipline. It is just a power failure. Get the backup generators running. 3 soldiers ran to the generator, fumbling in the darkness. They connected the fuel lines and pulled the starter cord. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. They tried again. Same result. The fuel had been contaminated with a chemical that prevented ignition without causing any visible change to the liquid. Yoonji had done her work well. Across the colony, the residential areas remained lit. Houses glowed with warm light. Street lamps illuminated the paths between buildings. The Vecren could see the humans had power. They just could not figure out why their own systems had failed. That was when the first shot came. The Vecren communications officer was reaching for his long-range transmitter when his helmet exploded. He dropped instantly, dead before his body hit the ground. The soldiers around him dove for cover, scanning for the shooter. Nothing. No muzzle flash. No sound of gunfire. Just death from the darkness. 3 seconds later, another shot. The backup communications operator had just grabbed the radio when a bullet found him. Same result. Perfect accuracy from an impossible distance. Hyun lay on the grain silo, eye pressed to his scope. 1,200 meters to the first target. 1,185 to the second. Both shots were center mass through the helmet, just as he had planned. The rifle was still zeroed perfectly after 15 years. Some skills did not fade. He shifted his aim to the next priority target. A Vecren officer was shouting orders, trying to organize a response. Hyun breathed out slowly and squeezed the trigger. The officer fell silent permanently. On the ground level, Taejin emerged from a tunnel opening behind the Vecren perimeter. With him were 3 others: Jiwon, who had served in zero-gravity combat, Somin, who specialized in close-quarters battle, and Dabin, who was simply very good at not being seen or heard. They moved through the Vecren camp like ghosts. Sentries died silently, pulled into the shadows before they could raise an alarm. The Vecren had placed their guards facing outward, watching for attacks from outside the perimeter. They never thought to watch their backs. In the power station, Yoonji monitored everything. She could see the Vecren positions on her screens, could hear their increasingly panicked communications on the frequencies Kyungho had not jammed. She made notes updating Daeho's team on enemy movements and weaknesses. The Vecren commander on the ground, a captain named Vreth, finally grasped the severity of the situation.
"Fall back to the school,"
he ordered. "Take the hostages. If these humans want to fight, we will show them the price of resistance." 50 Vecren soldiers broke from their positions and ran toward the school building, where they believed 30 human children were being held. This was their leverage. This was how they would regain control. They burst through the school doors, weapons ready, shouting commands. The building was dark inside. Captain Vreth ordered lights. Portable lamps flared to life, illuminating classrooms and hallways. Empty. Every room was empty. "Where are the children?" Vreth demanded, his translator making his voice harsh and metallic. A voice answered from the darkness behind them. It was Daeho, calm and cold. "Safe. Did you really think we would leave them here after you threatened them?" The Vecren spun around, bringing their weapons to bear, but they were too slow. Daeho and his team had been in the school for 2 hours, hidden in positions the Vecren never checked. They knew every corner of this building because their own children learned here. Their neighbors' children played here. What happened next was not a battle. Battles required 2 sides with a chance to fight back. This was an execution. Daeho had been a special operations soldier for 30 years. He knew how to clear buildings, how to use angles and shadows, how to move so efficiently that the enemy never saw him coming. Beside him, Minji provided covering fire while simultaneously marking targets for the others. Bora and Dongyun flanked from the east side. Every movement was coordinated, every shot placed with surgical precision. The Vecren fired wildly into the darkness, hitting walls and empty desks. The humans fired carefully, each bullet finding its target. In 90 seconds, 23 Vecren soldiers were down. The rest tried to retreat but found the doors blocked. Captain Vreth raised his hands in surrender. "We yield. Under Galactic Convention, we surrender." Daeho stepped into the light, his weapon trained on the captain. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. Galactic Convention applies to military forces. "We are not military. We are retired. We are civilians defending our homes. You threatened children. You took hostages. There are consequences for that. You cannot do this," Vreth protested. "This is murder." "No," Daeho corrected quietly. "This is justice. You came to our home. You threatened our families. Did you think we would simply accept that? Did you think retirement made us weak?" Bora emerged from the shadows, her weapon steady. "During the war, we had rules. We had orders. We had politicians telling us what we could and could not do." She smiled, and it was terrifying. We are not at war anymore. We are just very angry civilians who happen to have certain skills. The remaining veteran soldiers dropped their weapons, 13 survivors out of 50. Daeho had them secured in the school's cold storage room, hands bound under guard. They would live for now. Someone had to carry the message back about what happened here. Outside, the battle was winding down. Hyun had eliminated every veteran officer he could identify. Taejin's team had cleared the eastern perimeter. Yoonji reported that the veteran were trying to call their ship, but could not get through the jamming. By dawn, 187 veteran soldiers were dead. 13 were prisoners. The colonists had suffered 0 casualties. Not one human had been seriously injured. The colony was silent as the sun rose. Bodies in veteran armor lay scattered across the settlement. The humans began the grim work of cleanup, gathering weapons and securing the area. Daeho stood in the center of the colony, looking at the warship still in orbit above them. He knew what was coming next. Commander Thrak would not accept this defeat. The warship would retaliate. He activated his communicator. Yoonji Jiwon Kyungho. Is the satellite ready? There was a pause. Then Yoonji's voice came back, tinged with dark amusement. The water processing satellite? Yes, it is ready, though technically it is not processing water anymore. Daeho smiled grimly. Good, stand by. I think our friends in orbit are about to make another mistake. Above them, in the darkness of space, Commander Thrak stared at his screens in disbelief. His ground force was gone. 200 trained soldiers defeated by farmers. It was impossible. It was humiliating. It was about to get much worse. Thrak made his decision. If the humans would not surrender, he would burn their colony from orbit. He would make an example that the whole galaxy would see. No one defied the Vecran Empire. He ordered weapons charged and locked targeting solutions on every major structure in the colony. The school, the residential areas, the farms, everything. In the power station, Yoonji saw the energy spike on her sensors. The warship is charging weapons. 30 seconds to firing. Daeho did not hesitate. Activate the satellite. High above the planet, a small station that everyone thought was for water processing rotated on its axis. Panels opened. Systems that were definitely not for water processing came online. The Vecran never saw it coming. The quiet village. The morning sun rose over the fields of New Pyongyang, painting the rice paddies in shades of gold and amber. Daeho wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked across his farm with satisfaction. The crops were growing well this season. In a few weeks, they would be ready for harvest. He was 58 years old now, with gray streaking through his dark hair and permanent smile lines around his eyes. His hands were calloused from 15 years of farm work, and his back sometimes ached when the weather changed. He looked like any other farmer in the colony. That was exactly how he wanted it. Daeho walked back to his small house where his wife Minji was preparing breakfast. She was humming an old song as she worked, her movements precise and efficient. She had been a medic once, a long time ago. Now she ran the colony's small clinic, treating farmers for minor injuries and children for scraped knees. It was good work. Peaceful work. The Kims are coming for dinner tonight, Minji said as Daeho washed his hands at the sink. And Hyun mentioned he has a new recipe he wants to try at the tavern. Daeho smiled. Hyun owned the only tavern in the colony, a cozy place where neighbors gathered to share stories and drinks. The man loved to talk, always had a joke ready, and made the best grilled meat anyone had ever tasted. He was also the finest marksman Daeho had ever known, but nobody talked about that anymore. The colony of New Pyongyang was home to about 300 people. Most were farmers like Daeho, growing hybrid crops that thrived in the planet's rich soil. There were also teachers, mechanics, shopkeepers, and craftsmen. It was a simple place, far from the busy trade routes and political centers of the galaxy. That was why people came here. They wanted quiet. They wanted peace. Bora rang the school bell at precisely 8 o'clock, calling the children to their lessons. She had been teaching here for 12 years, and the children loved her. She was patient and kind, always finding new ways to make learning fun. Sometimes parents saw her staring at the sky with a distant look in her eyes, but they never asked about it. Everyone had a past. Out here on the frontier, people respected privacy. The morning passed like any other. Farmers worked their fields. Children attended school. The clinic saw 2 patients, both with minor ailments. Hyun prepared for the evening crowd at his tavern. The colony's 12 security officers made their routine patrols, more out of habit than necessity. Nothing ever happened here. That changed at noon. The sensors picked it up first. A ship dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. The colony administrator, a nervous man named Young-Ho, checked the identification codes. His hands began to shake. It was a Vecran warship. The war had ended 15 years ago. Humanity and the Vecran Empire had signed treaties. There was supposed to be peace now. But the Vecran were known for testing boundaries, for seeing how far they could push before anyone pushed back. The warship moved into orbit above New Pyongyang. It was massive, bristling with weapons, its dark hull blocking out the stars. Young-Ho tried to hail them, his voice cracking slightly as he spoke. The response came quickly, broadcast across every screen and speaker in the colony. Commander Thrak appeared, his reptilian features twisted in what might have been a smile. "Human colony," he said in accented standard. "You will surrender all supplies and technology immediately. You will also provide tribute of 1/10 your population as laborers. Resistance will result in orbital bombardment. You have 6 hours to comply." The transmission ended. Across the colony, people stopped what they were doing. Parents pulled their children close. Young-Ho tried frantically to send a distress signal, but something was jamming the communications. They were alone. Daeho was in his field when he heard the announcement. He stood very still for a moment, looking at the dirt under his fingernails, the simple tools in his hands. 15 years. 15 years of peace, of growing things instead of destroying them. 15 years of sleeping through the night without nightmares. He set down his tools carefully and walked to his house. Minji was already there, standing in the doorway. She looked at him and he looked at her, and no words were needed. They had both known this day might come. In the back of the closet, behind the winter clothes they rarely needed, was a sealed container. Daeho pulled it out and opened it. Inside was equipment he had not touched in 15 years, still maintained, still ready. His old combat gear, his weapons, his other life. He picked up his communicator, an old military model that used frequencies the Vecran would not detect. He entered a code he had memorized decades ago and sent a single encrypted message. It was just 3 words. They touched children. Across the colony, 11 other people received that message. They were in their homes, their shops, their workplaces. Each one stopped what they were doing. Each one went to their own hidden containers, their own carefully maintained equipment. Hyun was in his tavern when the message came. He read it, sighed deeply, and locked the front door. In the basement, beneath the wine storage, was a rifle case. He opened it and ran his fingers along the weapon inside. 847 confirmed kills. That was the official number anyway. He had stopped counting. Bora was teaching mathematics when her communicator vibrated. She excused herself, read the message, and very calmly dismissed the class early. The children were confused but obedient. As they filed out, she sent a secondary message to all parents. Keep the children inside, away from windows. By the time the Vecran dropships began descending, carrying 200 soldiers ready to enforce Commander Thrak's demands, 12 ordinary colonists had become something else, something they had tried very hard to leave behind. The dropships landed near the school, the administration building, and the main residential area. Vecran soldiers emerged, weapons ready but postures relaxed. They had done this before on other colonies. Humans always surrendered when faced with overwhelming force. It was simple mathematics. Commander Thrak watched from his ship, pleased with himself. The colony had no military presence, no defenses worth mentioning. By evening, they would have their tribute and supplies. The humans would learn their place once again. In his ready room, Thrak called up files on human military capabilities. He read about their soldiers, their special operations forces, their reputation for ruthlessness in combat. Then he laughed. That was during the war. The war was over. These were farmers now, not soldiers. What Thrak did not know, what none of the Vecran knew, was that on Earth, when soldiers retire, they do not stop being dangerous. They simply stop asking permission. Daeho checked his weapon one last time. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across his farm. In a few hours, the Vecran would learn an important lesson about human retirement. It was going to be a long night.